if, instead of Bethany just introducing me as Sarah Sasson, founder of Kula, all these awesome things, she said, I want to introduce to you Sarah Sasson. She grew up in an abusive alcoholic home that led to massive anxiety and depression, and that depression almost cost her organization twice last year. But it didn't. She didn't quit. She's here. Standing ovation. That will never happen to me. I will never be defined by what I've overcome. I will always be defined by my achievements, because I'm the white girl that helps people. I'm not the one being helped. I will never be defined by my worst moment. But here's the thing, and this is what I want to talk about, is that we are all more than our worst moment. Brian Stevenson, founder of Equal Justice Initiative, says we are all more than the worst thing that we've done. And some of us, our worst moment is the worst thing we've done, and some of us, it's the worst thing that's happened to us. But I want to explain this in the context of my work. I'm going to tell two stories about one woman and share two photos that we took on the same day. Before I share the first story, I want to say that I have her permission to tell this story, and she knows I'm telling it in this context. Otherwise, you would say you just did what you told us not to do. So, this is Maria. I first met her in May of 2014. We were in Rwanda collecting stories from the women who would soon receive Kula coffee trees. So we're at her house, and it's a beautiful day, not too hot. We're sitting outside of her house on these awesome handmade benches surrounded by beautiful flowers and free-roaming chickens, and she's there to tell us her story. So we set up a fancy camera, and she's sitting in front of us, and I'm sitting behind the camera with some of our team. And she starts to tell her story. And about halfway through, she gets to what happened to her and her family during the 1994 Rwandan genocide, which most of this room probably knows what happened, but 1 million people were killed in just 100 days, and the rest of the world did nothing. Maria was 13 when the genocide started. At the beginning, she had a mom and a dad and 6 sisters. Very early on, her dad and her 6 sisters were killed by men with machetes and thrown in the river at the base of the mountain. Maria and her mom hid in their house, and if anybody came to the door, they would hide further in the house just to be safe. And then one day, 2 men came to her house, knocked on the door, but instead of hiding, she saw that it was her neighbors, so she answered. She thought maybe that they were there to help her and her mom escape the country, but they weren't. They told her that they were the ones that killed her sisters and her dad, that they were there to finish off her family. Maria's mom tries her best to save her only daughter, and she tries to bribe them with money, with food, with beer, with goats, and nothing worked. So as her last resort, she offered herself up to be raped, and Maria had time to escape. So she runs out of the back of the house, runs down the mountain to the valley, hides under papyrus reeds for 3 weeks by herself underneath dead bodies as a 13-year-old. So she gets to this point, and I lose all ability to control my emotions and just start sobbing. And I'm sitting there in so much sadness and disbelief, but also so much shame and humiliation that I still have a camera in front of her face, knowing that there's no way I could ever use this footage. So she comes over to me, starts consoling me because I'm so sad about her story, and she takes the bottom of her beautiful Rwandan wrap and wipes the tears off my face and quickly switches to the rest of her story. Everything I just told you about Maria, everything she told me is true, but it's not her only story. It's an incomplete story. This is also Maria. We took this picture about an hour after we took the one you just saw in the field right in front of her house. She told us that after the genocide, she was able to find her mom, but her mom had contracted HIV/AIDS when she was assaulted. So Maria spent her teenage years taking care of her mom. But there was this guy in the village named Martin, and he saw how much Maria struggled to care for her mom alone. So he helped her with food, with money when he could, with farm work. And he never asked her anything in return. He just wanted to help her. After Maria's mom passed, Maria said that she finally decided to give Martin a chance, and they started dating, and they got married. They have 2 little boys named Sammy and Umuheza, and recently they have a little girl that they named Martina after Martin. And Umuheza is a word in Kinyarwanda that translates to a link. See, Martin was a Hutu. He was a member of the tribe that committed genocide against the Tutsis, like Maria's family. But they saw their son as a permanent link of love between Hutu and Tutsi people. Maria now has a big coffee farm. They expanded their coffee farm. They have a banana farm, a super hot pepper farm. She works so hard to start a tailoring business. She's an activist in her community for childhood education. She believes that if every child in Rwanda is educated, a genocide will never happen again because people who can think for themselves cannot be brainwashed. So she's lobbying her local government to build a primary school closer to their village because right now the super littles have to walk an hour and a half to get to 1st grade and 2nd grade. Maria is fierce. She is obviously stunning. She's a whole head taller than Martin. And she is fighting to build a business. And she has to fight so much harder for opportunity and access to the tools to do that than I do because of where she lives. But here's our dilemma. How can we all care and be just as moved by Maria's 2nd story as we are her 1st story? How can we see ourselves in one another without one of us having to be a victim? We do this, Kula does this, or we try to do this, through 2 major ways. The first is don't make decisions about them without them. We cannot make decisions about a group of people without involving that group of people in those decisions. Sounds very obvious. It is not done that much. When we make decisions without them, we immediately create a hierarchical relationship where we're saying, even though I don't know you, I am not you, I'm not where you're from, I know what's best for you. I've worked in Rwanda for 6 years, but I've worked in Africa for almost a decade. I have seen so many organizations and startup or do-good social enterprises develop really awesome programs in really cool spaces like this, and then we implement them over there. And then when they fail, it's, gosh, well, maybe they just weren't ready for it, or I don't really think they worked hard enough. Rarely is it, man, that was our fault, because we never took the time to ask them in the first place. For example, last month I was invited to a conference in DC. It's invite only, and for people like me who geek out over global political economies and sustainable development, this is like the conference. And I've been waiting 8 years to be invited to it. And so I finally get invited. The speaker lineup is just like this fantasy lineup. And then there are breakout sessions where you actually get to work with these speakers, and we're all coming together to bring new ideas to eradicate extreme poverty. So I go to delta.com to book my flight to DC, and then I go to register for the conference, and it's $1,700 for this 3-day conference. Do you know who can't bring new ideas on how to end extreme poverty to a conference that costs $1,700? People that live in extreme poverty. I started Kula for this very reason. I wanted to start an organization to where the people whose lives were supposed to change as a result of our programs had a say in all of it. Kula means community. Everything we would do would come from the community. But then when we started, I realized why people don't like to do that. It's super hard, and it's even more uncomfortable. And you get told that you're wrong a lot. This is that happening in real time. Our friends happened to capture the moment where our community leader had just told us that this huge, expensive program that we implemented had failed. And by failed, I mean it literally burned up. It was our fault. We forced a program to try to please a donor. I was not willing to trade short-term discomfort for long-term success. I was not willing to go to this donor and say, stay with me. I know you really want to be able to give this as like a present to your family for Christmas, but it's not time. And the result was it burned up. We failed anyways, and I lost so much trust that we had worked so hard to build in that community. This happens all the time. How can we stop doing this? How can we stop pricing people out of conferences, stop leaving them out of the decision-making rooms? How can we stop choosing donors over dignity? All right, I'm about to pour cold water on all of the nonprofit do-gooders' favorite phrase. We are not voices for the voiceless because no one is voiceless. I have learned in the past 10 years more than anything else that not a single person doesn't have a voice, but a whole lot of people are silenced. We have to shift from trying to be a voice to the voiceless to being a platform for the silenced. When we ask people what they want to say, we learn so much. When we're the voice, when we crown ourselves as the voice, we get to tell all of the stories in our own narrative. Churchill said, "History will be kind to me, for I intend to write it." Even with the best of intentions, we always end up being the heroes, and we're the ones who take the victory laps. But when everybody else gets to speak, we learn so much about people, about their hopes and their dreams and their challenges, but their ideas to address those challenges. When we give people a platform, we learn incredible answers to questions that we never knew we were supposed to be asking. This is Olive. Olive recently graduated from our Kula Fellowship. When we took this photo, she said, "What are you using this for?" And I was a bit taken aback, and I felt like the only thing I could say in that moment was, "What do you want me to use it for?" And she said, and I swear this is a direct quote, "Tell people that I am strong and that I can do anything." And I was like, oh my God, you can do anything. You can. But then she went on to tell us how we had kind of dropped the ball in maintaining communication with our graduates and some of the challenges that the graduates were facing that we didn't even know about yet. That is not how I planned on using her photo. But it is so, so much better than anything I could have come up with. But more importantly, it's her truth. We believe that the pinnacle of dignity is being able to write your own story. It's being able to live a life that is defined by your choices and not your circumstances. It's when every single person who wants to achieve something can achieve anything and they're not being held back because of who they are. It's when people who want to start a business can, because access and opportunity are equally distributed just as much as talent is. But we are not there yet. But we at Kula, alongside all of you, are going to keep fighting until we can get to a place where we are equal. And that fight is never not worth it.